Welcome everyone to the post-trade week wrap edition of Bombercast for 2023. I am your regular co-host, The Grizz, and with me is your other regular co-host, Bonser34, here to wrap up what's been a protracted but ultimately fruitful trade week for the Essendon Bombers. Bonds, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. And you're right, it was protracted, although we weren't the only club that supposedly drew it out. And I put the word supposedly because I'm not entirely sure the process is as drawn out as the AFL would like you to believe for their TV show that they are now obviously doing the last day, deadline day as they've labelled it. Because obviously Geelong supposedly held out for pick 76, Port Adelaide held out today for 73. We held out for an extra pick on D'Ambrosio. I don't know if anyone really believes that clubs actually hold out for those late picks.
Yeah, I think that's probably the worst kept secret in football. The trade week, deadline show. I think they try and replicate whatever's happening in US sports, but what they don't realize is in US sports you can get traded, and in the Premier League, for example, in European soccer, you can get traded sort of without consent, and so there are deals that just sort of happen right up to the last minute. And it is very exciting, but yeah, but Essendon was a major player, it seems, in this period. There were or five really official deals that went down. There was a trade for Xavier Dersman and Brunswick Veto, which was essentially a play for player swap. I mean, Port might claim they got pick 73 and two future fourths, but that's really nothing considering Essendon was unlikely to use those picks. And then obviously brought in Ben Mackay, Jade Gresham, Todd Goldstein, and by free agency and trade out Massimo D'Ambrosio for a couple of nothing picks, to be honest. I just wanted to start Bonts. It's sort of four players in, two players out. So you look at the ins and outs. It's in Dersmo, Mackay, Gresham, Goldstein, out Zerk Thatcher, D'Ambrosio, and a whole bunch of fourth rounders and third rounders, which are unlikely to be used. On the face of it, it looks like a decent off season. I just wonder in the context of Brad Scott saying we're going to be patient, we're going to develop, bringing in sort of four more mature players sort of goes against that. Now, the argument against my argument is, well, we've bought in three of them for absolutely nothing. So you're really just adding depth and best 22 players without giving away trade capital and draft capital, which is what probably happened at North Melbourne when they were trading first rounders for Jasper Pittard and Jared Pollock. But do you see this as a departure from that idea? And what do you think of the trade week as a whole?
I don't, and the reason is I think you need to look at the bigger picture. So yeah, you're right in saying okay, we brought in four mature bodies, but for example, Andrew Phillips has gone, so we needed a mature ruck replacement, and I don't think you can get any better mature ruck replacement than Todd Goldstein on the market. Scott Lysett from Port Adelaide's available, but I don't, if you're going to look for that 1 to 2 year stopgap, which appears to be what we do now, we appear to go for an older ruckman for a couple of years. We did the Jonathan Giles. We ran. I mean, even going back as far as 2016, we ran Mark Jamar through there for a bit. So I think you look at that and you go, well, Phillips out, Goldstein in. It doesn't really change the profile of the list at all. Again, you look at Ben Mackay in, but we've also lost Zerk Thatcher, so you sort of need to be able to replace. Zerk and Ben are probably around a similar age. So again, it doesn't. I don't think it changes the profile list at all because one in, one out type thing. You then look at Dersma, who's only 23. Yeah, he's played a bit, but you could argue again we've lost sort of a early 20s player in D'Ambrosio. Again, I don't think it changes the list profile. And to be honest, bringing the 23-year-old in like Dersma is probably not really pulling the trigger as such. It is probably more of a wait and see because we're obviously hoping that he gets to the level that everyone thought he was going to get to when he broke onto the scene and his body hasn't held up. And then you got Gresham and yeah, I mean, he's probably the only one you could look at and go, oh, we've brought in an older player, but we're not really, are we going to be contending? But it's a spot on the field I think we're lacking. I don't think we have a player like Gresham, apart from maybe say Jake Stringer, and Jake's not fit. He's not, he hasn't been able to get on the park last year. So, and another thing I suppose with Gresham is he probably takes Will Snelling's spot, so therefore he's probably an upgrade. So again, you look at it and go, well, we're not really pulling the trigger or trying to fast track. I think we are still holding firm because we're going to take our first and two second rounders, I believe now,
Yep.
into the draft. So yeah, I think we've sort of stuck with what Scott said. I think we are just more or less developing. We basically just reinforced the list with what we've lost with players we've gained, and we'll go to the draft and bring in more youth.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing. And I raise it because I saw it on the board, a few people saying, oh, well, there we go, we're already going mature. But I think the key is, like you said, we've still got our first and second round picks for the next couple of years. Whereas, like I said, when the comparison being drawn is what Scott did sort of toward the end of North Melbourne, which it should be said, the board ruled against Scott. Scott wanted to go to the draft, but they gave away first round picks for guys like Jared Pollock and Jasper Pittard and those sorts of players. We haven't done that. And the demographic remains the same, but we'll get into the individual deals now. We'll start with the trade that went down roughly an hour ago. So we're recording this basically 8:30 on a Wednesday night. After the trade period has ended, a long and protracted deal. Xavier Dersma has been traded to Essendon for Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, pick 73, and a couple of half-eaten packet of twisties next year, otherwise known as fourth round picks. So Essendon wanted this to be a player-for-player swap for the majority of the trade week. Port countered today asking for a future second rounder back, which seemed a bit rich. Obviously ended up that way. I think it's a great deal for us because I think bringing in Mackay and with Reid and Cox and Baldwin in the wings, we could afford to lose Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, whereas Dersma brings something we desperately need, which is leg speed and running power, which I think toward the end of last year we showed we're missing against the good teams like Collingwood and GWS. I can see him slotting onto a wing and releasing Nick Martin into a more attacking forward half role, maybe stepping into that stringer role, and if Stringer's not fit and being in more attacking positions and using his foot skills going inside 50 more. How do you feel about the Dersma and BZD Brandon Zerk-Thatcher trade? Do you see it as about fair? Are you happy with Dersma as a player, and how do you feel about Zerk-Thatcher leaving?
It's a tough one because you're right in saying that we do have replacements for Zerk. But I mean, I'm a big fan of Zerk, so I think he's much maligned across the entire AFL. To be honest, I think Port are going to end up getting a very good player in Brandon. But I think the problem we've got with saying blokes like Reid and Mackay is they do have their injury histories. I mean, we still don't know what we've got with Reid. We all hope that we're going to have a gun centre half back, and he was a high draft pick and all that sort of stuff. But we also thought that with Aaron Francis, and as we all know, that didn't end up being the case. So I think if we hadn't brought in Mackay, I think losing Zerk would have hurt a lot more than it will. I think that Mackay is just going to basically slot into the Zerk role. There was a lot of talk about Mackay's foot skills, so he's not that great by foot. But having said that, neither Zerk, and what Zerk learnt to do for us was to play within himself. He learnt to take the kick he could hit. He didn't try anything fancy. So as long as we can get Mackay doing the same thing, I think at the end of the day, as long as Mackay stays in the park, and that's the touchwood scenario, isn't it? Whether or not he stays in the park, then yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably a straight swap, and then Dersma on top of that is just a nice little bonus. I'm not sure if he pushes Martin forward as such, because I think playing Martin in that role we saw this year didn't work that great. I think Martin was much better to stay on the wing. So if anything, I'd be hoping that Dersma would probably be replacing Durham on the other wing, maybe. But Martin may be able to adjust his game if he spends more time in the preseason playing that sort of role you described. So he may come good. But yeah, I think we are very much should be very happy with that trade, because those late picks and look, those fourth rounders will probably end up being nearly earlier than the 70 odd that we gave up this year. But who really cares? Fourth rounders don't really mean anything.
Yeah, the future fourth rounder, you can get them for you can get a fourth rounder pretty easily if you want one. Like, it's not hard to trade those in, but I think with Martin playing more forward and Dersma going to win, I think when Martin went forward in that second half of the year, it was when the midfield was getting soundly beaten and we couldn't transition the ball from half back. So I don't know if we got a proper look at Martin in that sort of attacking in soccer parlance it's probably called your classic number 10 or your central attacking midfielder, which is like this sort of forward half attacking player, which isn't quite your genuine goal scoring option but sets a lot of the play up. But it'll be interesting to see how Dersma fits into the team because he did show a lot in his first year. Died away with some injury, like his form's died away with some injury issues, but hopefully with the good preseason he'll be able to step up. Well, we've already talked about Mackay, so we might just go straight there now. Ben Mackay obviously was probably the biggest free agent option available this year, at least by name of all the free agents available. I think Ben Mackay and Jade Gresham probably were the two highest paid free agents of the period. I think the deals ended up being over 800K with incentives, I think is the general vibe from the reporting about it. A 6-year deal. It's a bit rich for my blood, but I also understand that the size of the offers being thrown at him by Hawthorn and Sydney meant that we probably had to get there to get him across the line. We do have what was it, $2 million in cap space to try fill this year, so maybe you front load a lot of that so the back end isn't as expensive. But yeah, like you said, it's pretty easy to see him fit into the team, isn't it? You just sort of slots into that Zerk Thatcher role. Laverty all of a sudden goes to having the second best forward into the number one. Ridley and Cox probably have the third and fourth best forwards, and it probably slots everyone into better positions. But what's your view on Mackay? I know we had a conversation about Mackay probably a couple of months ago when the reporting in Fox Footy was he was all but signed. A good deal, 800K for 6 year. Like, was that just a going rate for defenders nowadays?
Well, I'm always skeptical as to what the media reports in figures anyway, so I'm not entirely convinced that it is as high as that straight up. But even if it is, the cap is going up, and this is a conversation I had when Baldwin was signed for 300,000, and there were people on the board that were outraged. And I said, "Well, 300 grand's actually about average for an AFL. There's not many AFL footballers these days who get past their rookie contract and get less than $300,000." And there was a bit of a meltdown about that, and some figures were thrown at me, and I actually asked for the source to those figures and never got them. So that sort of left me smiling. But so you look at stuff like that, and people's attitude towards money just clearly hasn't moved with the times. So 800 grand is probably, in 2 years' time, the cap goes up. It's probably $600,000, $500,000, $600,000 in 2016 money, 2018 money. So if you look at it like that, is it that much? I don't think so.
And like the other thing you've got to realize is, I imagine a significant portion of that, it's 800 per annum. I would be shocked if there isn't some level of significant front loading happening. So in the back end of that deal, it is probably closer to your 650, assuming 800 is correct, which, like I said, we can't necessarily assume. He might be 656, which is about league average. I think they expect when the cap goes up in the next couple of years, the median wage is going to be 500,000. So he's not going to be that far above median, to be honest. And there is a level of sticker shock with every sort of big free agent contract, and we saw Norton get 8 year, $9 million, and I think
which is madness. Which is madness. I think it's madness.
Yeah, and I think, and Rayla Galea got a 5 year, 700K a year offer from Hawthorn. Key position players just are getting these ridiculous deals at the moment because they don't come available very often. And if it is 800K a year and we can front load it, I don't think it's that bad a deal. I think he's a clear need. Because I think Scott and Dodoro talked about Reid and Mackay together as a combo, which would be fascinating to see. That's a very tall backline, but who knows? But everyone at the club talks about Zach Reid as if he can get his body right, he's a player. But we'll see how that goes. The other major free agent deal that went down was the deal with Jade Gresham. So this was a weird one, Bonds, because there was this rumor about Essendon doing a deal with Gresham and it being mixed up with this trade for Shield and pick 13 and pick 13 going back to Essendon. And they weren't going to get first round comp unless they traded the pick back to Essendon. It was a whole thing. The shit fight on BigFooty between Essendon and St Kilda supporters were a sight to behold. But ultimately, he signed for a deal which is roughly 700K a year again over 3 years. So a shorter term deal, pick 19 goes to St Kilda as compensation. I don't mind it. Like you said, the creative half forward types. We've got Guelphy and Mendy, who is promising, but not soon. Like he'll probably be best 22 next year, but he's not going to set the world on fire. And Will Snelling, who's honest but not all that dangerous as a forward. There is scope for him to come into the team and provide something, and he's already paid his way to go to Arizona with the rest of the teammate, with the rest of the players going over. I think there's 15 going across, so that's at least a sign that he's taken this very seriously. And I don't mind the pick. I don't mind the pickup, to be honest.
No, so the problem is, I think with the whole weirdness over Gresham is, I don't see any world where it was advantageous to us to get rid of Dylan Shields' contract because we had the cap space. And I don't think there's any world where it's advantageous to St Kilda to give us back pick 13 for Dylan Shields. Somewhere along the lines, I think the media's just got their wires crossed. And then the reality, and the thing was, there were so many different stories coming out about that. I don't think anyone ever got it right. And the whole shit fight thing just did my head in because it didn't make sense for either side to do that. And both fans just got fixated on the fact that it wasn't right for their club. And they couldn't understand it because their club wasn't going to benefit. The reality wasn't, it just didn't make sense at all. So I thought at best what was probably going to happen with the whole Dylan Shield thing would be that we would upgrade our second round pick to the compo pick for St Kilda. But I didn't think it'd be pick 13. I thought it was always going to be pick 21, which is what they ended up getting. And so that was the only way I saw that Dylan Shield deal going down. In that we'd give up Shield and 28 or 29, whatever it is now, and then get 21 back in return, which wouldn't have been a bad deal, I don't think. But yeah, it's good to see Gresham has been a bit proactive early with what he's doing with the club. And he has been a very good player. I mean, I think there was a stat going around, and I'm not sure if you saw it earlier in the week, that only in the last 2 home and away seasons, only 3 players have averaged 20 disposals, a goal, and a score assist. And those players are Christian Petrarca, Dustin Martin, and Dylan Moore of Hawthorn, who's a very underrated forward, I think. And then you've got Jade Gresham, who has averaged 20 disposals, just under a goal a game and a score assist. So he's in a very rare group of players that can get their hands on the ball, can still hit the scoreboard, and can assist their teammates. So I think if he can bring that sort of level to us, I think it's definitely a massive win.
Yeah, and the allure to him is obviously the same as Mackay and Goldstein, that it only cost us cap space that we had to use anyway. And again, I would be surprised if there wasn't a significant level of front loading to his deal. So 700 a year, again, sticker shock. Wow, that's a lot. But we're using cap space next year that we needed to use anyway. And we probably front load it. So the back end of that deal is, probably about league average, which I think is helpful.
I just want to touch on that cap space that you're mentioning too, because I think so. I don't think either of these players would have the TPP increase into their contracts. I don't think they'd have that. And the other thing is, so first, the compensation for free agents this year was based on what the salary cap was this year. So it's already sort of been talked about that next year 800,000 for Mackay wouldn't actually get band one compensation, which shows just how much the salary cap's going to be increasing anyway. So if you sort of look at it in that perspective, we're paying the premium based on 2023 prices, but for 2024, it's actually not considered enough to get a band one compensation, or in Jade's case, a band two compensation. He'd only attract band three next year with his contract that he got from us.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by sticker shock. You look at the initial sort of numbers and you go, whoa, and then you sort of delve into it a bit more. And you're like, it's actually, we're using cap space that we had to use anyway, and we're getting salaries locked in without TPP increases, which look a lot now, but aren't going to be going forward. And so for free, you're upgrading areas of the ground which need upgrading, and I think it's smart business. Like otherwise, you have to trade for these type of players, and then you are doing what North Melbourne did under Scott, which just that's when you get into a hole. And it's what we got. We got into a hole post 17 and 18, trading for Stringer and Smith and Sard and Shield, who wasn't a bad idea at the time, but we're now missing that glut of players of that age group that we're starting to get back in now with Caldwell and Dersma and trading these guys in. But again, it's trading Caldwell for a couple of seconds and Dersma for BZT. You are using capital to fill those holes. So signing free agents and using your draft picks is the way. And I think this is probably an argument not an argument, but a discussion to have later on, maybe in a different podcast, is I don't think you can build from the middle. I don't think you can. I think it's impossible to build from the bottom now without 4 to 5 years of absolute putrid football. And I don't know how many clubs have the stomach to do it. I think we're going to see a lot more of clubs building from the middle, like Essendon are trying to do, like Sydney have done for the last 15, 20 years since 2005. Like we're seeing Geelong do. Teams are going to try and build from the middle. Oh, Geelong's building from the top, but you understand what I mean. Like the full-on bottom-out rebuild just doesn't work unless you bottom out for 4 to 5 years at a time. We're looking at North Melbourne now. The Gold Coast went through 2 of them and they still haven't made the finals. Like they're still just coming to reap the benefits of those, high-end draft picks in 2017, 18, 19 now. And, if you can sign free agents and you can keep your draft picks, maybe that's the way to build a premiership list going forward. Anyway, we'll move to the final free agency signing now, which is Todd Goldstein. We've already touched on this. We don't spend too much time. Like I said, Flip gone, big injury cloud over Draper's start of the year. Whenever you hear big men having groin issues that linger and then require surgery, you start to get nervous, particularly with Essendon big men. Obviously, the thoughts of Joe Danaher and James Stewart come to mind. I think this is a great pickup. I was genuinely concerned he was going to go to Collingwood. There is a world where he plays 20 games next year and looks like one of the best pickups of the offseason.
I would hope there's not that world where that happens, because I still think you need to be playing Draper and Bryan as the two. But if that does happen, I suspect it happens because Sam Draper's injury has been more serious than what the club has let on so far.
Yes, well, I think that there's a part of it, but there's also that Scott has shown most of this year that he wants to play 2 rucks. And so, yes, you would prefer to play Bryan and Draper, but if one of them are injured or one of them's out of form, then there's going to be a scope, I think, for Goldstein to play. And he may, the optimum world is he plays somewhere around 10 games, chops out Draper or Bryan when they need a rest. But I think it's a pretty good pickup. Like, as far as your third ruckman go, you won't find many in the competition better than Goldstein. And again, you pick him up for free. So I thought it was perfectly fine as a pickup.
Oh, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with the pickup. I'm just saying that I just don't think. I mean, ideally, I think Todd plays a lot of VFL football and is there as a mentor for Nick and Sam. But so when we talk about there isn't a world where he plays 20 games, that's probably at this stage, that's probably the least desirable result for me. I would much rather see Nick and Sam play. And unfortunately, if he plays 20 games, I think, as you've alluded to, it probably means one of them's either injured or seriously out of form, which is a little bit concerning. Because Todd's only going to be there for a couple of years. He doesn't have another 10 years in front of him, unfortunately, as good as it would be. And we're certainly hoping that Draper's probably got another, 6 to 7, and Nick's definitely got another 10 years in front of him. So, you'd hope that at some point they're going to step up, and the mature rucks that we keep churning through, the Phillipses and the Goldsteins, are only there as a break glass in case of emergency, rather than as a better option than the two younger blokes we have on our list.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just groin injuries for ruckman and key forwards and big men scare me. So I this might be catastrophizing, but I wonder if there's a good chance Draper doesn't start the year in the team, just because of that groin and trying to ramp up. And even if he recovers from it, trying to ramp up conditioning, there's a good chance that he's not available for the first part of the year. And maybe that's catastrophizing, but lingering groin issues tend to be something you can manage, not something you get over. Anyway, so there was a pick swap as well, which I didn't mention at the start. Essendon basically shuffled around a whole bunch of picks and got an upgrade this year from pick 53 to 35, which I don't think does anyone fancy, but it will be interesting to watch on draft night. I suppose the thing we should note now, just briefly before we maybe get into a bit of a Dodoro discussion, is that there's three guys still out of contract: Jaden Hunter, Patrick Voss, and Will Snelling, all out of contract and waiting to the outcome of the trade period to know what's going on. I tend to think Voss is in trouble. I think Hunter might get a chance just because he was a mid-season draftee and he showed something before he got injured, but they might be upset about the fact he came injured to begin with. And I think Snelling might be in trouble with the inclusion of Jade Gresham. What's your thoughts on a bit of play, keep or shed with Hunter, Voss and Snelling?
Yeah, look, I don't have a particular strong feeling on Hunter one way or the other because I just haven't seen enough of him. So, I mean, mid-season, he'd probably be stiff to be dropped because he did get injured after, played okay. And we are pretty desolate for tall forwards. So he probably gets a gig for that. I think Voss is probably pretty stiff to not have got a game last year. And if he goes, it's probably pretty disappointing because, I've ranted on this podcast multiple times. At some point, you've got to give blokes like Voss a go at the AFL level purely to see what they've got. And we didn't do it. And so whether or not he could have made it as an AFL player, we'll probably never know if he goes. And yeah, I think Snelling's in trouble with Gresham. I think Gresham takes his spot, the best 22. And when you then look at the fact that you've got blokes like, because both Davey twins will be available next year, not just one. So Jaden will be there as well. Jai Menzies is there, who's also a small forward who can sort of probably play that Snelling role, and Guelphy can play that Snelling role. All of a sudden, where does Will fit into the side? And I don't think he does. And unfortunately, I think his height probably plays a small part in that. Because he is not an overly quick player for a player of his height. I know that he does do a lot of defensive pressure, but you could probably, as I said, the Davey twins themselves are pretty quick. You got Tex down there as well. I just don't see where Will fits in. So he's probably most likely of the three to be cut. I'd say Voss is probably 50-50 at this stage, depending on what we do with the draft. And then, I think, the big fella's probably the one that most likely will keep.
Yeah, I think there's rumours that Tex may have done his navicular, which if that's the case, I wouldn't be surprised if we invite Will to come and train over the summer, put Tex on the long-term injury list and bring Will in for the year. But that's a pre-season question, I suppose. We've got a few minutes left. We've got 6 minutes left. So we might just talk about Adrian Dodoro, who's now moving on. Matt Rosers sort of took over. From this point on, I think there'll be a handover from Dodoro to Rosa. I think the AFL.com.au and Fox Footy got the absolute most out of it, being his last trade period with the amount of protracted negotiations and hard to deal with tags. You've had a particularly strong view on this. I've had a view which echoes yours, perhaps not as strong, being that it was time for him to move on. it looks like it's finally happened. Bont, how have you seen sort of Dodoro's last sort of off season, and so what are your thoughts about him moving on?
Well, it depends because I mean, are we saying now that is Adrian back in charge? Because I've been hearing for a while that Adrian's not in charge, and yet every all media reports seem to indicate that Adrian is still very much in charge. So it's a tough one because it seems to be a case of if Adrian, if the trade period or the draft goes well, then Adrian was in charge, and if not, then there's a whole list of reasons as to why he wasn't. So I think overall our trade period is pretty good. We didn't lose anything. I don't think we lost anything. We kept a relatively full hand of draft picks this year. We go into next year's draft without a third round pick, but whoop de freaking do. So yeah, look, I think overall as a trade period, it was pretty solid. Yeah, whether it's his last one, I don't. We'll see. He seems to be still very very much committed to transitioning Rosa, and Adrian doesn't strike me as a man that transitions by leaving. So we'll wait to see if he's still there front and center next year. He may very well still be there next year. Maybe he won't be front and center, but I'm sure if he was there, we'd still see part of him anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what the media's going to do without him during trade week. I mean, Dodoro, hard to deal with, is the go-to, isn't it? There's always one deal a year. It's like, classic Dodoro. If he's not there front and center, what are they going to do? They might. I think they've already started to transition that tag over to Fremantle and Port Adelaide and Geelong. Even I think they need a villain, I suppose, and I guess
they do. The one point I did raise though, because people keep saying that point. My point to that is though, Adrian doesn't need to be difficult. Just it's not like he's being difficult because the media says he's difficult. He's being difficult for his own reasons. So I get that Adrian's difficult to deal with and Dodoro is difficult to deal with. He's become a bit of a meme, but there's no smoke without fire. So at the end of the day, like I mean the Ambrosio stuff is just stuff that I don't understand how that took so long. Like, and then there was reports that we were then clarifying Dave. Oh, but we took him mid-season, so that actually doesn't make him a real rookie. So therefore, he shouldn't be able to like that stuff's a little bit cute. And if we were just upfront and taken the 63 or said to Hawthorn, yeah, okay, we'll take 63, but we want a future fourth as well. They probably would have just done it, and we would have been done with it. Instead, we seem to get to the last day, and here we are looking a bit silly, but it all came good in the end, I suppose. And as I said earlier, who knows whether or not it actually did get to the last day, or whether or not it's a little bit of an AFL manufactured drama as they're trying to raise.
Yeah, I have this running theory that I think Dodoro can be hard to deal with. But I also reckon that opposition clubs know that he has that tag, so they can play hardball and know that they're not going to cop the heat for it. Like they can be the one protracting out negotiations, and Dodoro will cop the heat in the media because it's Dodoro. But I suppose we'll never know. I don't think that's the case all the time, but in some times, like I just remember the Paddy Ryder trade where they started by offering a future offering the second round pick for Paddy Ryder, and everyone's like, "Oh, Dodoro, classic, hard to deal with." Turned it down. It's like it's Paddy fucking Ryder. Like, of course he turned it down. Anyway, that will probably do us for today. The draft is in a month, which is amazing. I can't believe that we're almost to that part of the year already. But we'll work behind the scenes to see if we can get one of the local draft experts, maybe P and Bangers, back on to discuss Essendon's draft hand and players that might suit us to those picks. Bont, it's been great to chat to you again. It's good to see Essendon have one trade week again for this season. Thanks for jumping on.
It was a pleasure as always.
All right, well, that will wrap us up for this week. Make sure you like, subscribe, and tell all your Essendon supporting mates. Enjoy your week to come, and we'll chat soon. Thanks.